Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Aquatic habitat, basically we have divided the habitats into two parts. One is the oceans, right? So oceans are different because they are saline, right? So they have, the water is salty. So when we talk about another kind, so usually the kind of habitats that we are talking about is ponds, lakes and rivers, right? Definitely, when we talk about ponds, lakes, and rivers, they all are different from one another. But there's one thing which is quite common among them is that the water is fresh, right? So they have fresh water. That means there are no salts mixed in this water, right? So these are the two kinds of aquatic habitats that we are going to talk about, and we're going to see that what kind of organisms are living in these habitats. Also, when we talk about oceans and ponds or lakes or rivers, there's a huge difference between the demographic or the way the ocean is. For example, if we talk about ocean, it's a huge water body and it is very, very deep. Whereas if we talk about ponds, lakes and rivers, they are not as deep as oceans, right? So now let's move on and talk about oceans and the animals that live there. Now, we have already talked about that how fishes are adapted for the aquatic life. They have a streamlined body for swimming, right? So streamlined body actually helps them to swim easily. Apart from that, they have fins, right? These fins also help them in swimming easily, right? There are certain animals like squid and octopus. Now, this animal is an octopus. You must have heard about the animal. And as you can see from the image, you will find that these animals are not streamlined shape. Like, for example, if you compare the body structure of a fish and an octopus, you will find that fish is more streamlined, right? Whereas octopus or squid is not as. Whereas octopus is not as streamlined as a fish, right? Also, if we talk about the dwelling areas of these kind of animals, that is the octopus, squid, usually these animals live near the seabed. Seabed is basically the bottom of the sea, right? So usually they live near the seabed and they are very deep inside, whereas fishes usually we see that they are swimming on the surface. On the other hand, animals like octopus and squids are basically deep sea creatures, and you will find them near the seabeds. Now, these are the animals which, like as you can see in this particular picture also, that they live near seabed and they catch whatever animals that come near them. For breathing, both the animals, the animals staying in the aquatic environment breathe through gills, right? Because the oxygen that they require to survive is mixed in the water. So gills are the special kind of organs which help them to respire inside such environment. Although these animals like octopus is not a streamlined animal, the body is not streamlined, but when these animals swim, right, these animals, you can see they swim in the streamlined fashion. Means whenever they are swimming, as you can see, they will make their body streamlined. Like you can see, this body has become now streamlined, right? So whenever the octopus is swimming, they change. So during swimming, the body becomes streamlined, right? So streamlined body is very, very important whenever it comes to swimming. The reason is that water is comparatively denser than the air, and that's the reason why it will, if the body is streamlined, so what will happen, the water will flow like this, and the organism will be able to move forward very easily. So this is one of the very important features. Now, like we already mentioned, the aquatic organisms have gills for respiration. But you must have observed that dolphins and whales, they usually come up on the surface and they release a fountain of water. This is a phenomena which is, very attractive, and you must have, one way or the other, on the television or on any channel, you must have seen these pictures and videos. So what happens there? So it's a very important thing to understand that sea animals like dolphins and whales, right? So this is a dolphin, right? And this is a whale. So the special feature about both of these animals is this part. These animals actually do not breathe with the help of air, gills. They actually breathe in air. Unlike other fishes, you must have seen that fishes do not come up onto the surface to breathe, right? These organisms need to come up onto the surface, right? Fishes have gills because they need to extract oxygen from the water. Whereas on the other hand, the sea animals like a dolphin and whale, they do not do that. They require air. So what they do is that they come up onto the surface, and with this particular organ, that is the blowhole, right, they take in air, right? So this blowhole actually helps them in taking in air, and what they do is this particular fountain which you are able to see in this video is the excess water that might have gone in, right? So what they do is they remove that excess water through the blowhole, right? Now, the speciality of these animals is that they can stay inside the water for a very long time. Now, how is it special? If you look at yourself, and if you look at me or any other human being or any animal who's living on the land, without breathing, they will not be able to survive for a long time. Suppose if I close my nose like this and I'm not breathing, I won't be able to stay like this for a very long time, right? Whereas on the other hand, these animals are able to stay in the water for a very long time, and they come up to the surface from time to time to breathe the air, right? So you can imagine that when they are inside the water, they are not breathing, right? So whatever oxygen they take up during this surfacing, that is the oxygen they use when they are inside the water, and whenever they are either hunting or they are just swimming around. So they are using the oxygen that they have utilized, they have taken in when they have come to the surface. So for breathing, these animals need to come onto the surface, and these blowholes actually help them in doing so. It is located, as you can see, on the upper part of the body of these animals, right? So the example of such kind of animals, like I said, is dolphin and whale. And in this way, we see that there are different kinds of organisms. There are a variety of organisms in the ocean, right? So I hope you were able to understand the different features of the animals living in the ocean, the ponds and lakes. Now you must have seen certain ponds and lakes around you, and you must have seen various kinds of plants growing in there. Now, if you just observe and see those plants and just observe the plants that are on the land, you will be able to differentiate, and you will be able to see certain features which are different in the aquatic plants, whereas certain features which are totally different in the plants that grow on the land. Now, we are going to discuss and we are going to compare that how these aquatic plants are different than the plants that grow on the land. Right? So now these plants there are different types of plants that we see when we talk about aquatic plants. First, just enumerate these kinds. First of all, we have the plants that are completely submerged, meaning that these plants are completely under the water and none of the part is above the water, right? Then you have the plants which are floating plants. These are the plants, students, which will float along the surface of the water from one place to the other. Then you have third kind of plant, which are fixed plants. Now understand these, that the fixed plants actually are fixed to the bottom of the lake or the pond, right? So these are the three kinds, and we will see that how these three kinds are differently adapted for each of these features, whereas we will also find out that there are certain things which are common among all of these. Now some of the plants, like I said, are submerged and others are fixed, and few of them are floating. So you will find that the role of root is quite different in all of these plants. When we think about role of the root in the terrestrial plants, we know it is a very important role. The role of root in the terrestrial plant is to absorb water and minerals from the soil, and also to fix the plant into the soil, right? So these are the two very important functions without which the plants will not survive. Whereas when we talk about the roots in the water, you will find that roots have a very little role. They do not perform the function of absorption or of water or mineral, definitely, because that is not needed. The only function it performs is in the submerged plants, and in the fixed plants are of fixation, right? So the only function the plants roots have is to hold the plant in place, right? Hold the plant in place. Now, if you see that the roots, because they just have this function, the roots are quite reduced. They are not as developed as the plants that are on the land, because they do not have the absorption function. That means that function which we saw in the terrestrial plant. We've already studied about the parts of the plant in the previous chapters, and in this chapter we're just understanding that how the roots of aquatic plant is different from the terrestrial. So like I said, in the terrestrial it has a very important role, whereas the roots are reduced and just are used to hold the plant in place, right? Then another important part of the plant is the stem. Now, when we talk about the terrestrial plants, we see that the stem is again a very, very important part. And we have seen that in herbs, in shrubs, right? Especially in the shrubs and the trees, we've seen that the stem is quite hard and is used for supporting the plant. Usually, the stem of the aquatic plant is hollow and it is light, right? Apart from that, the stem is usually long, especially in the fixed type of plant. So suppose this is the bottom of the lake, right? And over here you have the surface, right? So let's just imagine. So over here you have the root system, and the flowers and the leaves are on the surface. The stem, it has to go over up to the surface. So the stem is usually very long. Apart from that, the stem is hollow so that it can remain light. The reason is that the plant actually does not need the support from the stem. It just needs the stem is just to bear the flowers and the leaves, right? Like in the case of shrubs and the trees, we saw the stem was supporting the structure of the plant, but in this case this is not so, right? In the stem is long, it is hollow, and it is quite light. You might have seen, even we actually eat this vegetable, we call it kamal kapri. So it is a part, it is a stem, right, of lotus. So what it looks like is it's long stalk and it has holes, right? So how it looks is something like this, right? So it has holes like this, right? Next time, whenever you go to a vegetable vendor, I would suggest that you ask for this, and you can ask him to give you a kamal kakri, and you just observe the structure. You will find that although it is quite long, but it's really light, and it has these hollow structures in it, right? So even if you cut it, like if you cut the horizontal parts, you will find that these are there in the whole stem. So in this way, we see that how the stem is hollow and light, and it is long. Another thing which is very important is that the stem is especially in the submerged plant, as you can see, the stem is really soft so that it can flow along with the flow of the water, right? So if the water is going this way, right, the current is this way, the plant is able to flow towards that way, and without this actually helps that the plant from harming itself, right? So if suppose the stem was stiff, right, and the water was flowing this way, what would happen? The stem would break, right? But in the case of these plants, the stem is very you can say it's very soft and is able to flow along with the water current. Now, the next part, if we talk about, are the leaves. Now, in the leaves are again a very important part of the plant, and same is the case in the submerged plant also. The leaves of some of the aquatic plants that are submerged are, so submerged plants usually have ribbon-like leaves, right? Ribbon-like leaves, right? Also, the plants, as you can see, they are highly divided. Over here also you can see how divided they are, and if you pluck one leaf, you will find that it is it looks somewhat like this, like a ribbon, right? It's very flat. Also, on one stem you will find that how, it is quite divided, right? These are highly divided, and these are the type of leaf which allow the movement of water through it very easily, right? So ribbon like leaves help in help in plant to remain submerged properly without harming itself. These leaves are highly divided, through which the water can easily flow, right? So from this the water can flow easily without harming the body of the plant. So these are ribbon like and they are highly divided in this way, right? So like I said, this is a submerged plant. Over here you can see this plant is a floating plant. The plant which is floating, the leaves are usually above the surface like this. As you can see, this is the surface of the water and the leaves are on the surface. So in this way we see how different the adaptation are there in one habitat itself, depending on the location of the plant. So if the plant is submerged, there is a totally different type of adaptation, and when the plant is floating, there is a totally different type of adaptation. So I hope you were able to understand both these types. Moving on, let's talk about a special animal, and this is an animal which you must have seen almost every year. You must have seen it during the monsoon. This is a frog. Now it is a very special animal. Why? Because it has the ability to stay both in water. The habitat is both water and land. Now, if you look at the frog's legs, right, you will see that how the hind legs are webbed, right? These webbed legs help it in swimming, right? You can see that there are webbing, means that when there is a skin, there is a very light layer of skin between the two toes. So over here you can see how these animals have webbed feet, webbed legs, which help them in staying and swimming in the water. Apart from that, when we talk about the land, these same legs help it in moving ahead and moving forward. The hind legs over here, you can see these are really strong and are used for jumping, right? So the frog has a very strong hind leg which allows it to jump forward on the land, and in the same way they have webbed foot, so that, or rather I should say webbed legs, which allow them to swim in water, right? So in this way we see that how this particular animal is adapted to live both in water and land. This is why I said that this is a very special kind of animal, right? So I hope you were able to understand the difference between the different kinds of animals that are living on the terrestrial as well as in the aquatic habitats. Also within the habitats, aquatic habitats also, you were able to see the difference between the animals that are living in it and also in the plants that are living in it, right?